How's everyone doing? I'm on a job site. I had a funny conversation today. Um, Job site's not exactly going smoothly. It's a big oil and gas project in the States, and a lot of hiccups. A lot of hiccups. And this young electrician because as an engineer, I'm not exactly allowed to do certain things. I have to have the electricians do stuff. And me and this electrician have just been dealing with a whole slew of just frustrating things. And the kid says to me, "This has to be the worst site you've ever worked at." And I said, "No, not by far." And he goes, "Well, where have you worked?" I was like, "Name a country, I probably worked there." And he started listing off countries like Pakistan, India, Colombia, Venezuela, Afghanistan, Iraq. And I'm just going, "Yep, yep, yeah, I worked there. Yeah, I worked there. Yeah, I worked there." And the kid's like, "Well, I got to ask you, sir, what's the single worst place you've ever worked at?" I said, "Easy, Seattle, Washington." And the kid did a bit of a double take because I don't think he was expecting that. He goes, "What do you mean, Seattle, Washington?" I was like, "It's the only place I've ever been a victim of a crime." And of course, we had some downtime. Like, we were basically waiting for tags to clear and stuff. He goes, "Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to hear this story." I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll fill you in." I was like, "I've worked in Seattle probably about a dozen times, and this is like the seventh or eighth time that I've been there. Um, Seattle and Oregon have a lot of aluminum plants because of the airline industries for the U.S. For all intents and purposes. All the planes that are built, all going all the way back to World War II, are kind of built in the Pacific Northwest." And the kid goes, "What made it so bad?" And I was like, "Well, what ends up happening, whenever I go to a site, I contact the end user and I ask them for a hotel recommendation. Because usually places will have a hotel or whatever in mind that generally they recommend people to go to. It might not be the best hotel in town, but it's the easiest hotel to get to, and from the site and back and so on. I'm like, yeah, when I'm in the mid Southwest, there might be a 5-star hotel in Memphis, but if I'm going up to northern Arkansas, northeast Arkansas, that's a 2-hour drive every single one way, and you don't want to have to do that. That's awful. I'm like, so usually the end user gives me a decent hotel within traveling distance where it's not so incredibly frustrating for me. So this aluminum mill recommended a hotel in downtown Seattle. And I'm like, and when I showed up, it wasn't, I'm like, it wasn't a complete dump or whatever. I was like, I think it was like a 3-story, maybe a 4-story hotel. I was on the second floor. And the very first night I'm there, I got all my stuff in the hotel room and so on. I checked in with my wife and my kid, and I went to sleep. And I got woken up probably around like 2 a.m., someone banging on my door. And very stupidly, in just my boxers, I cracked the door open. I was like, I should have looked in the door peephole, and to this day, I check the peephole every single time. But I cracked the door open, and I was like, and I had the locking device, old school, it's a chain, but in this case, it was like one of those U-shaped kind of things. And as soon as I cracked the door open, the person on the other end kicked the door full force as hard as they could. They ripped the locking device off the door jamb, and the door went right into my face. And I was like, and it broke my nose. And the kid's like, "Holy crap." I was like, "Yep." So it stunned me really good. It might have knocked me unconscious. I'm not exactly sure, but I kind of came to. I'm laying on the floor, and there's this guy kind of standing at my feet. So I got up, flipped the lights on, grabbed my phone, and I ran out of there. And the kid's looking at me, and he goes, "I got a hard time believing that you'd run away from anybody." And that's kind of the perspective a lot of people have about me because I'm so big. I'm a very, very tall, wide guy with like half my face melted off. I look like a horror movie monster. And I said, well, you got to understand, this guy was butt ass naked and he was covered in scratches and blood. And I'm a pretty intimidating guy, but I'm not about to get Hep C or HIV, getting into a fist fight with a crackhead. I was like, so I ran downstairs with my phone and I told them to call the cops. And they gave me a towel because I had blood coming out of my face because the guy broke my nose. And the kid's like, holy cow, what happened next? I was like, you ever see Reno 911 where the cops are all just standing around while the character Terry is acting like an idiot? And for whatever reason, they just keep putting up with it. It's pretty funny, isn't it? He goes, yeah. It wasn't funny in this scenario. I was like, it ended up about, I'd say about 8 or 9 cops showed up. And I'm in the parking lot. I'm in the police car because I'm like, you got to remember, I'm barefoot and I'm in my boxers. I'm freezing my ass off. I'm in the car with one of the cops, and I'm watching over the course of about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, as this guy is launching every single thing out of my hotel room. He goes, everything? I said, everything. TV, the couch, the mattress, and then all of my equipment, my work computer. The guy spun it like a gymnast, or I shouldn't say gymnast, like an athlete at the Summer Olympics. He threw my computer or my work laptop like a discus. I was like, and it flew over the car that I was sitting in. And I'm watching this go on and on and on because the cops aren't knocking the door down. All my equipment is destroyed. Everything is destroyed. I'm like, I watched as this knucklehead threw a $110,000 medium voltage scope from Japan. He just threw it and it smashed into 1,000 pieces. The kid's like, wow, that's crazy. I was like, yeah. Eventually, they had him down on the ground floor in the parking lot. Just for a little explanation, we have these things called safety grounds. And it's for medium voltage because it's so dangerous. All it basically is a very heavy copper cable with plastic or shielding on it. And on one end, there's a C-clamp. On the other end, there's another C-clamp. And it's so I can ground out a phase of the incoming power. This guy has one end and he's swinging it over his head like it's a medieval mace. And I'm watching as these cops are just, they're getting close and then they're backing away, getting close and backing away. And they're trying to talk this guy down. And I turn to the police officer, because I'm sitting in the front seat of a cruiser. I turn to the one police officer who's sitting with me, and I'm like, are you guys going to do anything? He goes, yes, sir, we are. I was like, he's destroying everything that I have. He's like, on top of this, I got to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Like, what's going on? Like, what is the plan here? And the guy goes, well, and I forget the name of the guy. Somehow, this police officer knew this gentleman's first name. It's like, well, you know, Tommy gets this way. And keep in mind, I'm holding a rag to hold back all the blood that wants to come out of my face because I have a broken nose, possibly a broken cheekbone. And I go, you're on a first name basis with this gentleman? Yeah, he gets like this. He gets a little bit excited, but we're going to get him calmed down. We'll get him the help he needs. And I wanted to say, oh, well, that's good to know. I'm sure that's going to fix my freaking face. Eventually, they somehow convinced him to put down my safety grounding strap and to let them put a blanket over him, and they escort him to one of the cop cars. And the cop I'm sitting with was like, well, Mr. Smith, we got everything taken care of. You're free to go. And I just turned to the police officer and I said, I'm free to go? He goes, yes. Are you going to take a statement from me, sir? He goes, what do you mean? I'm like, officer, I'm a victim of a crime. This gentleman has destroyed anywhere between 150,000 to possibly $250,000 worth of my equipment and the damage to the hotel room. And he physically, violently assaulted me. I need a police report. Well, we wouldn't consider this to be a violent crime. And I pulled the rug back, or I'm sorry, the towel back from the hotel, and I could feel the blood dripping down onto my chest. I was like, this isn't a violent crime. He pulls a pen out of his front pocket and he does like an eye roll at me. And I'm thinking, like, I'm the victim here. It's like, I am the victim here. This guy isn't the victim. He's the one that came into my hotel room and violently assaulted me. So he takes a statement. And then once he's done, he goes, because I have to tell him, I think the equipment's worth this, 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 this. I need you to have this in the police report. And he ends with, just so you know, for us to prosecute him, you're going to have to come back here. Because he knew I was out of state, because that's one of the things he asked me. And I said, the amount of money that he has cost my employer, I will be flown out here first class for the insurance. I will testify against this guy. Absolutely. 100%. So he's like, all right, I got your statement. You can go. One of the things that to this day really pisses me off is they gave that guy a blanket. They didn't give me anything. Nothing. So like I literally, once he let me out of the car, and it was in winter time, so it's not exactly warm. I had to go where my luggage ended up because my luggage was open. He flung all that shit out. So I had to find clothes in the parking lot to put on just so I could then start picking up all the bits and pieces and everything. I think it was around 5 a.m. when I got everything collected, and I called up the end user and I said, hey, that shutdown that's today that I'm supposed to be for, it's not happening. The guy goes, what do you mean it's not happening? It's not happening because, one, I've been up all night. Two, I don't have any of the test equipment I need because it's all been destroyed. He goes, what do you mean it's been destroyed? It's been destroyed because I got violently assaulted in my hotel room, the hotel room that you told me to stay at. And I'm heading to the hospital because I have to get my nose basically pushed into place. Of course, the end user got really shitty with me, and I told him, contact my management. Just call up my management. I'm in the emergency room once I got my nose fixed, I called up my management. I probably should have called up my management first. They had already heard from the end user. End user was not happy. My boss, this East German guy, Hans, was just like, what's going on? And I explained to him what happened. Hans was like, I imagine you're not cleared to travel. I do not want you trying to get on the plane until you are cleared by the doctors to travel. As soon as you're cleared, I want you flown out of there. I don't want you to handle any emails from the customer. I don't want you to handle any phone calls from the customer. I will handle this. Okay, Hans, I appreciate that. Like, that's one thing I appreciate about Hans. He's very East German, so he can be a bit of an asshole, but when it comes to his people, he's very, very protective. So naturally, I fly back to the home office, and I have mountains of paperwork to file because of the sheer amount of equipment that was damaged. A lot of this equipment we don't own outright. We rented for jobs. And now all this equipment is damaged. So I have the police report and so on. 2 weeks later, I get contacted by corporate legal. We got a problem. What's the problem? We don't see an active case. What do you mean you don't see an active case? It turned out, without telling me, the DA dropped the case against this individual because per the DA, this was not a violent crime. Blew me away. How is this not a violent crime? Especially considering the amount of money involved, along with the physical injuries. This is something that on the East Coast is a felony 6 different ways. But somehow on the West Coast, this isn't a big deal. And I'm explaining this. All of this kid, the kid just has this, like, his jaw's just dropped, right? because he's working at a facility in the South where once you hit about $5,000, oh, now you're talking about not even possibly getting bail in a similar situation. No, this guy got released. This is why you hear these horror stories about some meth head who's homeless in his 30s, picks up a cinder block and throws it over an overpass, and it kills like a family of four. And then, of course, once he's arrested, they realize that he's got something like 35 violent charges against him in like 6 different municipalities in Washington State. But for some freaking reason, they just keep giving him no money bail, keep releasing him over and over and over again. Like, it's insane, absolutely insane. And the kid goes, "Would you ever go back there?" I said, "No, I've never." I was like, "I've gone back to Seattle, but to that particular aluminum mill, no. My management doesn't even request me to go there. Because if they did, I'd say no." Because, like, man, that's crazy. I was like, "Yep, exactly. I've never had this issue before." Because that must be the least favorite place you ever have to go to. I was like, "Not quite true. Vancouver in Canada is worse." Like, he goes, "How's this worse?" It's like, "It's the same thing as Seattle, only have to deal with Canadian customs." But yeah, it's just funny thinking about this because I haven't thought about this. I've tried to suppress this for I don't know how freaking long. But I don't understand how anybody in Seattle is a taxpayer, because you must feel like the biggest asshole because you're taken advantage of, and if you're ever a victim of a crime, you're going to get victimized 3 times. You're going to get victimized by the criminal, by the cops, and then by the district attorney's office. But I digress. I'm done rambling. I hope you're all doing well. I'm going to stop recording, probably call up my wife and kids, see how they're doing. Y'all take care of each other. Ciao.